I only got one day at the boat in the past 2 weeks. The resin on the other side of the bulkhead hardened before I had a chance to trim it with the razor knife. So the boatyard is the perfect place to grind the excess fiberglass off of that edge, because I'm making a lot more noise and dust than would be really good to do in the retirement community. I'm gonna grind the edge kind of conservatively at first, and once I've got it pretty much where I think it's supposed to be, I'll take it in the boat for a test fit and then mark any other bits that I want to cut off to get a perfect fit. And it might go back and forth a couple times until it fits just right. It was a little bit flexible before the fiberglass was put on the honeycomb core, so now that it's stiff, it'll fit just exactly right. So yeah, I also trimmed the inside where the door will go, because fiberglass overhung, the outside and the inside. So I'm also doing those two little pieces of deck core that go next to the forward hatch on the same side. And now I've had this in the boat, and I've marked a couple of spots where I want to trim just a little bit off in strategic locations so that it is a perfect fit in the place where it has to go in the boat. And now I'm back in Vero, about an hour and a half's drive south from the boatyard. And this is my parents' garage. I'm using it as a workshop at the moment, and I don't have fiberglass on the door yet, and it's a very tight fit in the hole. So I need to trim away some all the way around to make some clearance for the door to open and close. And I also need to leave room there for the hinges. And also I have to fill in the edge, the open edge of the honeycomb. So I'm going to be laying a little bit of chopped strand mat all along that 3/4 inch edge everywhere. And that'll stick out a little bit, so when I trim this back I have to leave plenty of room for that. There's a few other problems. That isn't really very straight. This is really bad. I've cut the fiberglass back past where the honeycomb is, and that core kind of sticks out. And I'll have to cut that core back before I can lay chopped strand mat along that edge. Otherwise, the core will prevent it from bonding to the fiberglass on either side of the panel, which is really the only place it will bond. I've got these pieces of wood that I'm going to inlay in the one edge of the door and one edge of the opening for the door and the bulkhead. And this is so that the hinges can screw into the wood, because the honeycomb core isn't really strong enough to hold a screw. I'm using it as a straight edge while it's long, in order to mark where I wanted to cut. And although the bulkhead has a couple layers of 1708 on each side, and we'll get more before it's done. The door is not structural, so it's going to get just one layer of 3/4 ounce chopped strand mat on each side of the door, and that's all. That'll be enough to make it strong enough to be a door. And this is probably the lightest way that you can make a door. So I'm wetting out the scrim, that's sort of a fuzzy surface on each side of the honeycomb core, with some catalyzed resin before rolling out the chopped strand mat and then saturating that. And this is the next morning after that's cured, and I'm doing the other side exactly the same way. It's kind of interesting to see that writing on the door is covered by the fiberglass until it gets saturated with resin and goes transparent, and then you can see the writing again. And the world's baldest man brought me some cutoff wheels and a bunch of saws for the oscillating tool. So I'm going through the whole batch and I'm picking out a couple of tools that I'll be using. The real narrow one, and also like the circular cutting one. And I'm propping the panel up off of the floor of the garage with some styrofoam so that I don't run my blade into the concrete floor. So I'm just going all around the edge and cutting just a little bit of clearance for the door, and also hopefully leaving enough extra room for the hinge. Now I've cut that long board in half, and one half will go on be inlaid into the door, and the other half will be inlaid into the side of the bulkhead where the door hinge will be. And I'm using the round saw on the oscillating tool to cut the fiberglass loose from the honeycomb core on each side. And I'm doing that both with the door and the bulkhead. So now I've changed the blade on the oscillating tool, and this is the narrowest one. I think it's maybe like a 1/2 inch wide, and it's just perfect for going into that, cutting the core out from in between the fiberglass that's on each side of it. You have to cut the core away with the round cutter first, cut it loose from the fiberglass, and then you can go in with the narrow blade and sort of run that the length of, plunge in and then run that the length of the slot and peel out the core. This part here is at normal speed, so you can, it goes pretty fast. This lets you see exactly how this part of the job goes at normal speed instead of being sped up like most of the rest of the video. And those pieces of wood were a little bit wide for the slot that I cut. And because I don't have my table saw here, I'm just very slowly grinding them back until I get a tight fit in that slot. So I grind just a little bit, I test fit it, grind a little bit more, test fit it, and grind some more. no matter how many times it takes. And eventually I get enough ground off that it will fit in the slot just perfectly. A nice tight fit, that's what I want. And of course I have to do exactly the same thing for the other side. Just a little adjustment and it goes in just fine after editing out some of the other parts of the struggle. So I've catalyzed some resin and I'm painting the inside of that slot that I've cut out for the wood. And I'm also painting the wood with the resin, so everything is wet with resin before I start. And I took the rest of that little cup of resin and I put a bunch of thickener and some chopped glass fibers in it to make it kind of peanut butter thickness. And I'm spreading that on the sides of the slot where the wood is going to actually glue to it. It's going to be glued mostly to the fiberglass on either side and not so much to the honeycomb underneath. So that's where I want the resin to be and the thickened resin to be. And that's it. It's in the slot very nicely, and I'm just going to take a minute to wipe off any excess resin that's sort of squeezed out when I put the wood in there. And I've laid down a folded up trash bag, and I put another piece of wood to sort of focus the weight here, and I use the bulkhead to sort of squeeze this shut while the glue was hardening. And so a final inspection, and that's in there really nice. So next time I guess we'll try to put the door in the bulkhead.